Uh, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Imagine being discharged from your area, livelihood, and culture. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, we agree with this motion. And in order for us to understand this motion as a whole, we need to understand the definition of each word. Therefore, state here refers to the government of a country possessing a territory to govern, meaning that the state is accountable for the condition of the territory. Now, prioritize here, meaning that therefore within this motion, to mitigate a disaster is far more important and need to be done first than to just relocate. And then also, mitigation refers to an effort, in this case by the government, by making policies, infrastructure, or like education to the general masses, therefore preparing the people or the area itself in times of disaster. Therefore, losses and harm can be minimalized. Now, disaster refers to a condition or like a sudden event that causes destruction. Since we are talking about the condition of an area, which mostly the disaster that has the ability to impact an area massively is like natural disaster, then we'd like to limit this debate to only natural disaster, not the only one that involves conflict or like dysfunction for the people. So in this case, the disaster we're talking about is like earthquake, and then tsunamis, and then a volcano eruption, those kind of things. Relocation refers to the force movement of individuals due to the condition of disaster. It involves displacement of the people permanently to avoid environmental hazard. Now, in this motion, what I will be talking about is firstly, what is the dynamics of the disaster-prone area? What kind of people that lives there? What is their livelihood? What are they doing there? And secondly, how does mitigation function compared to relocation? And then thirdly, how will this system that we have can affect the area and the communities inside? Which is why we will be talking about the impact for the people, for the vulnerable groups, and for the government itself. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand the condition of the area and the people inside it. Notice the area prone to disaster are still beneficial in some way. For example, usually in mountainous areas, volcanoes, these areas have rich nutrient soil compared to other areas. The fertility of the soil is high, meaning that it's good for you to cultivate crops, which is why we can see plantation and industrial fields in volcanoes in mountainous area. And for example, people live near an area prone to tsunamis, meaning that it's next to the sea. They depended their lives on fishing, cultivating seaweed, pearl harvesting, even underwater tourism. We can see this from like fishermen and farmers all over Indonesia. For example, if you travel, you'll see them. Now, even though we have this risk of disaster, people are dependent on their environment, even it defines their culture as a whole. Now, opposition will probably bring the harmful effect of like losses due to disaster, but in the end, we would like to explain how they cannot ensure the well-being of the people due to relocation, which it will take more work, more effort than to just mitigate at the end of the day, and then how mitigation can collectively minimize the losses in long term. Now, ladies and gentlemen, moving on to the debate, when compared to relocation, disaster mitigation works so much better. Here is the thing. Ladies and gentlemen, mitigation is built or created so that it will help people without interrupting their daily routine. We need to know that mitigation works by modifying a certain behavior or the environment as a way to absorb disaster's impact or minimize the impact. For example, the existence of emergency exit makes it easier for people to mobilize even from skyscrapers. So a lot of people can be saved. And then we have people planting mangrove forest near the sea or like in beaches. Therefore, it can prevent waves and tsunamis. Furthermore, mitigation works in like a step-by-step mechanism. There is a mechanism before, within the disaster, and after the disaster happens. So mitigation collectively cover all the effort like within the area and for the people before, within, and after the disaster happened. Meanwhile, relocation works by moving people, moving their houses, assets away from the disaster-prone area. Okay, then, sure, it removes the exposure to disaster entirely. Sure, it removes the need to rebuild something after a disaster happened. But the downside is really, really massive. They're discharging people from their livelihood, meaning that they cannot eat. They will live in poverty because if, for example, if they live from fishing, if they live from like cultivating crops, they are taken away from that livelihood, and then it means removing their culture, removing the environment that they are so exposed in. And lastly, to relocate, it means that they will build an entirely new living area. And well, ladies and gentlemen, it costs more money than just modifying. So in the end, though mitigation only minimalizes the risk, losses may still exist, and to relocate doesn't have that losses. The harm exists in some other way that is ineffective in the long run. Meaning that by this, they're simplifying an effort that initially should be done very thoroughly for, as I said, before the disaster happened, within the disaster, and after the disaster. It has to be done very thoroughly, yet they are simplifying it. Now, for the government, ladies and gentlemen, under our side, mitigation becomes a system, a thorough system that is very easy to implement, that is very easy to be integrated to the people, to the community, because it's, from cost-wise and social-wise, because, we can just do like social education, and then the cost to modify is not as big as it is when you make a new entire village, make a new entire living area. So yeah, it's very easy to integrate. So for the long run, though losses exist, mitigation is far more sustainable and cheap. And for the vulnerable communities, in the times of disaster, they can be prepared for what's coming for the disaster, right? And after the disaster, they can get back to their daily routine. They still have their culture, they still have their community, they still have their livelihood. So it proves that mitigation is far more effective, it's less harmful than it is when you relocate. Therefore, we believe that in areas prone to disaster, states should prioritize disaster mitigation over relocation. Proud to propose. Thank you.